Welcome to tonight's journey into the world of mathematical mysteries and philosophical paradoxes. These are not problems designed to frustrate you, but rather puzzles that have captivated brilliant minds for centuries. As you settle into your bed and let your breathing slow, imagine yourself walking through a garden of impossible choices and curious contradictions. Each one we explore tonight will gently challenge the way you think about probability, decision-making, and the nature of certainty itself. Close your eyes and prepare to drift through these enigmas as you slip towards sleep. Level 1. The Monty Hall problem explained. Imagine you are standing in a television studio, facing 3 doors. Behind one door waits a beautiful car. Behind the other 2 doors, nothing but goats. You want the car, naturally. You point to door number 1, and your heart quickens with anticipation. But the host, a man named Monty Hall, does not open your door. Instead, he opens door number 3, revealing a goat. Now, 2 doors remain closed. Your original choice, door 1 and door number 2. Monty Hall turns to you and asks a simple question. Would you like to switch? This moment. This decision point is where most people's intuition betrays them. The answer seems obvious. 2 doors remain. The car is behind one of them. Your chances are 50-50, right? Wrong. When you first chose door 1, you had a 1 in 3 chance of picking correctly. There was a 2 in 3 chance the car was behind one of the other doors. When Monty opened a door with a goat, he did not change those original probabilities. He only revealed information. The 2 in 3 chance is still concentrated on the remaining unopened door. If you switch, you win the car 2 times out of 3. If you stay, you only win 1 time out of 3. Probability does not reset when new information arrives. It merely redistributes. This problem matters because it teaches us that our instincts about chance can mislead us. In the real world, we face similar situations constantly. We see new evidence and must decide whether to stick with our original beliefs or change course. The Monty Hall problem shows us that changing course, switching doors, is mathematically wise. Our fear of looking foolish, our attachment to our first choice, these are emotions that cloud judgment. Understanding this paradox helps us make better decisions in business, relationships, and investments. When evidence arrives that contradicts our initial belief, we should not emotionally cling to what we chose first. Probability favors the switch. Mathematics whispers this truth to us in the gentle darkness. Level 2. Sleeping Beauty's Dilemma Unsolved. A woman named Sleeping Beauty agrees to participate in an unusual experiment. She will be put to sleep on a Sunday night. A coin will be flipped. If the coin shows heads, she will be awakened on Monday, asked a question, then given a drug to erase her memory of the awakening. If the coin shows tails, she will be awakened on Monday, asked the same question, given the memory erasing drug, then awakened again on Tuesday and asked the question a second time. The question she will be asked each time she wakes is this: what is the probability the coin landed on heads? Now, think about this carefully. Sleeping Beauty will definitely be awakened at least once. If the coin landed on tails, she will be awakened twice. From her perspective, when she opens her eyes and has no memory of previous awakenings, she faces genuine uncertainty. Philosophers have argued for decades about what her answer should be. Some say the probability should be 1/2. The coin is fair. It lands on heads or tails with equal likelihood. Her awakening does not change the underlying probability of the coin flip. Others argue the probability should be 1/3. If we consider all possible awakenings across many repetitions of this experiment, 2/3 of awakenings occur on the tail outcome. When Sleeping Beauty wakes, she is more likely to be in a tail scenario because that scenario produces more awakenings. Her subjective experience, what she encounters upon opening her eyes, makes tails more probable. Still, others propose different answers entirely, suggesting the problem is poorly defined or hinges on how we interpret probability itself. This dilemma remains unsolved in academic philosophy. It reveals something profound about probability. When does an observer update their beliefs? How should repeated experiences factor into assessment? Sleeping Beauty's paradox challenges our understanding of subjective versus objective probability. In the real world, we constantly wake up into situations without memory of how we arrived there. We must judge likelihood based on current evidence. This problem teaches us that probability is not always straightforward. What seems objective, a fair coin flip, becomes subjective when observers have incomplete information. Level 3. The unexpected hanging paradox. A judge announces to a prisoner that he will be hanged sometime during the next week, Monday through Friday. However, the hanging will be a surprise. The prisoner will not know the morning of the day he is hanged which day it will occur. That night, the prisoner reasons carefully. The hanging cannot occur on Friday. If he survives Thursday, he will know with certainty that Friday is the day. The surprise would be lost. So Friday is eliminated. But now consider Thursday. If the hanging has not occurred by Wednesday night, the prisoner knows it cannot be Friday. Therefore, Thursday becomes the only possible day remaining. But then it would not be a surprise. So Thursday is also impossible. The prisoner continues this reasoning backward through each day. By this logic, the hanging cannot happen at all. Yet the judge schedules it for Wednesday. When guards arrive Wednesday morning, the prisoner is shocked. The surprise is genuine. The hanging does occur. How did the prisoner's logical reasoning fail? The paradox suggests that the prisoner's logical chain breaks somewhere. Perhaps the prisoner cannot know with certainty that the judge will keep his word. Perhaps the definition of surprise is not what the prisoner assumes. Perhaps self-referential reasoning about knowledge itself leads to contradiction. There is no universally accepted resolution. Some philosophers argue the prisoner's reasoning is sound and the scenario is impossible. Others suggest the prisoner's reasoning contains a subtle flaw. The prisoner assumes that if he knows when the hanging must occur, then he knows the hanging cannot occur. But knowledge of the hanging's timing might not prevent the surprise. If the prisoner doubts his own reasoning, the surprise returns. This paradox matters because it reveals problems with self-reference and knowledge. If I know that I know something, does that knowledge change the situation? Lawyers, mathematicians, and philosophers puzzle over self-referential statements. The unexpected hanging teaches us that reasoning about our own knowledge can trap us in circles. We cannot always reason our way out of every box. Level 4. Buridan's Bridge Choice. Imagine a knight traveling through a medieval land. He comes upon a bridge guarded by a figure who poses a challenge. The figure says, "You must answer a question. If you answer truly, you may cross and continue your journey. If you answer falsely, I will prevent your crossing and you must turn back." The knight agrees. The figure asks, "Will your next statement be true?" The knight must then make a statement. He chooses to say, "No, my next statement will not be true." Think about what happens. If the statement is true, then his next statement will not be true, which contradicts his claim. If the statement is false, then his next statement will be true, which also contradicts his claim. The knight has created a self-referential loop that cannot resolve. The guardian stands frozen, unable to determine whether to let the knight pass or block him. This is Buridan's Bridge paradox, named after a medieval philosopher who explored such logical knots. The scenario reveals something fundamental about language and logic. Statements that refer to themselves can create impossible situations. There is no fact of the matter about whether the knight's statement is true or false. The statement hangs in limbo, neither true nor false. In classical logic, we assume every statement must be one or the other. This paradox suggests the real world might be more complex. Some statements might be paradoxical by nature. Some questions might have no answer. The paradox matters in computer science and mathematics, where self-reference appears regularly. A computer program might reference itself, creating infinite loops. Gödel's incompleteness theorems, among the most important mathematical results of the 20th century, rely on self-referential statements. They prove that certain truths cannot be proven within a system. Buridan's Bridge teaches us that the universe of statements is more subtle than simple true and false. Language can trap us. Logic can circle back on itself. In the darkness of night, as you contemplate this paradox, you might wonder, what other statements in your own mind contain hidden self-reference? What beliefs do you hold that might collapse under scrutiny? Level 5. The drinker's paradox mystery. There is a pub somewhere, a quiet place, with a wooden bar and figures nursing their drinks in shadow. Within this pub, there exists a person with a special property. If that person is drinking, then everyone in the pub is drinking. Think about that statement. It seems strange, yet it is provably true in classical logic. Here is the reasoning. Either everyone in the pub is drinking or at least one person is not drinking. Consider both cases. If everyone is drinking, then you can point to anyone and say, if that person is drinking, then everyone is drinking. That statement is true because everyone is already drinking. If at least one person is not drinking, point to that person and say, if that person is drinking, then everyone is drinking. This statement is true because the person is not drinking, making the conditional statement vacuously true. A conditional statement with a false premise is always true in classical logic. So, no matter what, there exists someone in the pub such that if they are drinking, everyone is drinking. This is the drinker's paradox, also called the drinker's theorem. It is not actually a paradox because it is logically valid, yet it feels wrong. It seems to suggest something mysterious and impossible. The paradox reveals how our intuition about language diverges from formal logic. In natural language, we assume a conditional statement like, if that person is drinking, then everyone is drinking suggests a causal connection. The person's drinking somehow causes everyone else to drink. But in formal logic, conditional statements express only a relationship between truth values. The person's drinking does not need to cause others to drink. The statement is true simply because of the logical structure. This matters because it shows us the gap between how we think and how mathematics works. We are creatures of cause and effect. We expect statements to express real relationships, but logical systems are abstract. They care only about truth values and relationships between propositions. The drinker's paradox teaches us to be careful when we mix natural language with formal logic. A statement that seems to demand explanation might have a simple logical resolution. It invites us to think more carefully about what we mean when we speak, as we drift towards sleep. Level 6. The two envelopes problem. You are presented with two envelopes. You know that one contains twice as much money as the other. You do not know which is which. You pick one at random and open it. Inside, you find $1,000. Now you are given a choice. You can keep this envelope or switch to the other envelope. Let us think through the decision. If your envelope contains $1,000, the other envelope contains either $500 or $2,000. You assign equal probability to each outcome. 50% chance it is 500, 50% chance it is 2,000. The expected value of switching is half of 500 plus half of 2,000, which equals $1,250. The expected value of staying is $1,000. By this reasoning, you should always switch. But wait, this reasoning applies no matter which envelope you open first. If you had opened the other envelope instead, you would have arrived at the same conclusion. You should switch. This suggests that switching is always better, which seems impossible. If switching is always better, why not keep switching back and forth forever, gaining expected value with each switch? Clearly, something has gone wrong with the reasoning. The paradox is that the calculation seems sound at every step, yet the conclusion is absurd. The resolution hinges on recognizing that we cannot assign equal probability to both outcomes. The problem does not specify the prior distribution of money in the envelopes. Depending on how the envelopes were filled, the probabilities might not be equal. If the problem uses certain probability distributions, the expected value of switching is exactly 1,000, equal to staying. If the problem uses other distributions, switching might genuinely be better. The two envelopes problem matters because it teaches us about hidden assumptions. We often make decisions based on probabilities without acknowledging what assumptions those probabilities rest upon. In finance, in medicine, in personal choice, we frequently reason about uncertain futures, but our reasoning is only sound if our underlying assumptions are correct. The problem also reveals how easy it is to construct seemingly paradoxical situations through linguistic trickery. By phrasing the problem carefully, we can hide crucial information or create apparent contradictions. This paradox invites us to think more carefully about the foundations of our reasoning. Level 7. Newcomb's paradox decision. An entity of great intelligence appears before you. It is not human, but it is tremendously intelligent. It has studied you for years and has learned to predict your actions with remarkable accuracy. The entity presents you with two boxes. Box A is transparent. You can see it contains $1,000. Box B is opaque. You cannot see inside. The entity explains the rules. Inside box B, there is either $1 million or nothing, depending on what the entity predicted you would do. If the entity predicted that you would take both boxes, then box B is empty. If the entity predicted that you would take only box B, then box B contains $1 million. The entity has made its prediction and locked the boxes. Now you choose. You can take both boxes or take only box B. What should you do? One line of reasoning says, take both boxes. The entity has already made its prediction and locked the boxes. The contents of box B are already determined. Taking box A does not change what is in box B, so you gain an extra $1,000 by taking both boxes. By this logic, you should always take both. Another line of reasoning says, take only box B. The entity is highly accurate at predicting your choice. If you take both boxes, the entity will have predicted this, and box B will be empty. If you take only box B, the entity will have predicted this, and you will receive $1 million. To maximize your reward, you should do what results in the entity predicting that box B is full. That means taking only box B. These two lines of reasoning are both logically valid, yet they lead to opposite conclusions. Newcomb's paradox highlights a deep tension between two ways of thinking about causation and decision-making. The first reasoning treats the choice as made in a fixed world where the entity's prediction is already locked in. The second reasoning treats the choice as the causal driver of the prediction. Newcomb's paradox matters because it resonates with real-world situations. We often act to influence others' beliefs and predictions about us. We make choices not based on what we think will maximize our immediate payoff, but based on what we think will influence others to treat us better in the future. It questions whether we should think of decisions as fixed in time or as causally influencing the world. In your own life, you make choices partly based on what you predict others predict about you. This paradox invites you to reflect on the nature of causation and decision-making as you rest. Level 8. The lottery paradox explored. A lottery is held with millions of tickets. Only one ticket will win. You hold a ticket. The probability that your ticket will win is extremely small, perhaps 1 in 10 million. You reason. It is rational to believe that my ticket will not win. The probability is very high that I will lose. Now consider every ticket holder in the lottery. Each can make the same argument. Each can rationally believe that their ticket will not win. But these beliefs are collectively inconsistent. If everyone's ticket will not win, then no ticket will win. Yet someone must win. So at least one of these individually rational beliefs must be false. This is the lottery paradox. It shows that rationality cannot be defined purely in terms of probability thresholds. You cannot simply say if the probability is below 95%, it is rational to believe the opposite. Such a rule leads to contradiction. Some philosophers argue that the lottery paradox reveals limitations of probability-based reasoning. Others suggest that we should not form beliefs at all about lottery outcomes. We should simply suspend judgment. Still others propose more complex accounts of when belief is rational, accounts that consider the context and purpose of our reasoning. The lottery paradox matters because lotteries represent a class of everyday scenarios. In medicine, a doctor might assess that the probability of a rare disease given your symptoms is very low. Is it rational to believe you do not have the disease? In finance, you might assess that the probability of a market crash is low. Is it rational to believe no crash will occur? In law, a jury might be convinced beyond reasonable doubt that a defendant is guilty, yet that defendant might actually be innocent. The paradox reveals deep questions about the relationship between probability and rational belief. It teaches us to be humble about what we can know and believe. Just because something is unlikely does not mean it will not happen. Just because something is likely does not mean we should confidently believe it. The lottery paradox invites you to question your own certainties, those things you feel sure about based on low probability reasoning. Level 9, Sorites paradox grains. Imagine a pile of sand on a beach. A single grain of sand is not a pile. This seems obviously true. Now imagine adding one more grain. 2 grains are not a pile. This also seems true. Add another grain. 3 grains are not a pile. Continue this process. At what point does a collection of grains become a pile? The paradox is that no single grain, when added to a non-pile, creates a pile. Each step seems valid individually. Yet, beginning with 1 grain and repeatedly adding grains one at a time, we eventually have a clear pile of sand. How did we get there if no single step created the pile? This is the Sorites paradox, from the ancient Greek word for heap. It reveals that our language contains vague predicates. We use the word pile without a sharp boundary. There is no precise number where 1 grain fewer is not a pile, but 1 grain more is a pile. In classical logic, we assume every object either is or is not a pile, but language does not work that way. Language is tolerant of small differences. A single grain does not change the status of a collection, yet tolerating many small differences leads to a boundary crossing that logic cannot accommodate. The Sorites paradox matters because vagueness is everywhere. At what point does a person become old? At what point is someone tall? At what point does a recession occur? At what point is a person rude? Our language is full of vague terms. These terms serve us well in everyday life because we rarely face situations where the boundary matters. But in formal contexts, in law, in contracts, in precise specifications, vagueness becomes problematic. The paradox reveals that the structure of our language does not perfectly map onto the structure of logical categories. This has implications for how we think about identity, persistence, and change. If there is no precise moment when an object becomes a pile or ceases to be a pile, then perhaps there is no precise moment when a person ceases to be young, when a cloud ceases to exist, or when a company ceases to be the same company it was before. The Sorites paradox invites us to embrace vagueness and ambiguity as fundamental features of the world and language, not flaws to be eliminated. Level 10, the Beetle in Box. A philosopher named Ludwig Wittgenstein proposed a remarkable thought experiment. Imagine that several people are standing together, each holding a closed box. Each person claims that inside their box is a beetle. The other people cannot see inside the boxes. They cannot examine the beetles. They can only hear each person's reports about their own beetle. One person says, "My beetle is red and has 6 legs." Another says, "My beetle is blue and is very old." A third says, "My beetle has died." No one can verify any of these claims. No one can see any beetle. People simply accept what others say about their private beetles, or they do not. Now imagine that the boxes are actually empty. Every box contains nothing. Would the conversation change? Wittgenstein suggests that it would not. People would still talk about their beetles in precisely the same way. The word beetle would have lost its connection to any actual object. Instead, the word would become merely a role in a conversation, a token that people exchange without reference to anything real. The beetle in the box represents the problem of private, unobservable experiences. Each of us has subjective experiences: pain, color, sensation, emotion, thought. These experiences seem private. No one can directly observe them. Others can only hear our reports. Wittgenstein suggests that our language about these private experiences is not really referring to inner objects the way we might think. Instead, language is a public tool used in social contexts. When you speak about your pain, you are not describing a private object. You are engaging in public behavior, following social rules. The beetle in box matters profoundly for philosophy of mind. It challenges the assumption that our thoughts and experiences are inner objects. It suggests that language is fundamentally about shared public practices, not private reference. This has implications for understanding consciousness, communication, and what it means to understand another person. As you fall asleep, reflect on this paradox, your own thoughts, your own sensations. These are the beetles in your boxes. You experience them directly, but when you speak about them, Are you describing something real or merely playing a role in a shared language game? Perhaps the distinction itself is misguided. Perhaps what matters is not whether something is a private object, but whether we can share understanding with others about our inner lives. The Beetle reminds us that language is a bridge between minds. As we close tonight's exploration through these 10 philosophical labyrinths, remember that paradoxes are not failures of reason. They are invitations to think more carefully, to examine our assumptions, to grow humble before the mysteries of logic and language. Each paradox tonight has challenged something you might have taken for granted. That challenge is the gift. Let these ideas drift through your mind as sleep draws near. Tomorrow, you might see decision-making, probability, and language differently. Rest well.